I think it probably is a good deal for Germany in the sense that the infrastructure in terms of transport, accommodation, facilities available for broadcasters and so on, those facilities are already there.
The European Football Championship begins today in Germany. The question is, who's making money from it and who isn't? Kieran Maguire joins me now. He's an expert in football finances and co-host of the Price of Football podcast. Kieran, welcome to the show. Let's begin with UEFA. That's the governing body for the national associations, the football associations here in Europe. They're aiming for 1.7 billion euros in revenue. That would be the most ever. Can we say where it's all coming from?
Yes, it's mainly coming from the broadcasting deals. It's a very popular tournament, first of all with broadcasters within Europe itself, but we have seen an expansion of interest in football all around the world, such as the high profile, especially of players from Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, and so on. So on the back of that, the UEFA has managed to export the product, and that's also linked to the success of the Champions League, which has brought increased interest into European football.
And I think a lot of people may wonder, where do ticket sales compare to all the broadcast rights, things like sponsorships as well?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's three tiers of revenue as far as UEFA is concerned, which is, first of all, the broadcasting in revenue. Ticket sales have been excellent. It's impossible to get a ticket, as many fans who have travelled to Germany have found out. So we've got 100% in terms of ticket sales, but they probably only generate perhaps a fifth of the total revenue. And UEFA's also got its senior sponsors. So sort of the broad breakdown is probably around about half of the money is coming from the broadcast deals itself, perhaps 30% from commercial and a fifth from ticket sales, but they all make a significant contribution. And then, of course, you've got the costs of running the tournament and the costs of hosting the teams themselves, which UEFA pay for in terms of prize money.
And that 1.7 billion euros, where does it all end up going?
Well, for each team that is participating in the tournament, they've already received 9.25 million euro. It's €1 million per victory, and we're expecting to see clearly a lot of those over the next few days. It's €500,000 per draw as far as the group stages are concerned, and then you go through the individual tiers, so that we estimate that either side, the side that wins the Euro Championship, if they win every match, they'll probably take home around about €28 million. And then you've got the costs themselves, or the operational costs being borne by UEFA. It's going to have to provide security. It's going to have to provide facilities for the broadcasters, for its media partners, for its commercial partners, who get an awful lot of the tickets, by the way. And that sucks up an awful lot of the money. So will it be profitable for UEFA overall? Yes, but that money then gets redistributed at the end of the tournament, not just to those teams that have qualified for the tournament, but then there's sort of a more general distribution of money to all of the other member nations within UEFA itself.
So 1 million euros per victory. What do players end up seeing then for every victory, can we say?
Well, that's very much dependent upon their relationship with their football association. For many players, I think it's the honour of playing for their country. So all I can say as far as the English players are concerned, their match fees actually goes into a central pool, and that then is donated to charity, so that the players won't be getting any money from just appearing in matches. There will be bonuses for winning the tournament. And I think the players make the most money in respect to these tournaments, because they are also being paid by their clubs throughout the tournament. And UEFA has to pay money to the clubs as well for effectively hiring the players for a month. What we will see is that the commercial deals and every country in Europe and many elsewhere will be seeing the faces of some of the most high-profile players, the likes of Mbappe and so on, across advertisements, promoting products and so on. So that the players tend to look at it from a commercial perspective. The pride of playing their country means they're not necessarily looking to get huge amounts of money for the pride in wearing the shirt itself.
Kieran, when we talk about the revenues and the expenses, I imagine this would be quite different from the last edition of the Euro Football Championship back in 2021. It's technically the 2020 Euros, but it was held in 2021 because of the pandemic. I would imagine ticket sales were lower, correct? And maybe some of the I don't know how viewing was, but this is probably going to be a more lucrative football championship, I'd imagine, this year and compared to that one.
Yes, if we take a look at the 2020 and 21 tournament, first of all, we had the issues in relation to COVID, which meant that UEFA incurred costs but wasn't generating revenue. It had to give money back to ticket holders. It had to give money back to broadcast partners and commercial partners, and then reinvigorate the tournament 12 months later. But what we saw at many venues was that there was restricted access to matches in some countries because the local governmental rules were such that there was ceilings and there were caps as far as the number of people that could congregate together. So that very much put a restriction on UEFA's ability to sell out the maximum level of tickets. And also it was a rather strange tournament in the sense that historically the tournament has taken place normally in one country, perhaps two. The 2020-21 tournament was spread over a number of countries, which spread the costs as well. UEFA had to have representation across the whole of Europe, so it wasn't a particularly successful tournament. Whereas we would expect the German tournament to be far more lucrative. In fact, the only sort of global tournament, and here we're looking at the likes of the Euros, the FIFA World Cup and the Olympics, the only one which has actually made a profit this century was the FIFA World Cup in Germany in 2006.
Germany would obviously like to see a repeat of that in terms of the sort of economic buoyancy that created. What does it mean for the hosts ultimately? This year, as you mentioned, only Germany has these games, I believe 11 cities throughout the country. What does that mean for the hosts? Is this a good deal, essentially?
I think it probably is a good deal for Germany in the sense that the infrastructure in terms of transport, accommodation, facilities available for broadcasters and so on, those facilities are already there. What we have seen in other tournaments, so if we take South Africa in 2010 or Brazil in 2014, new stadiums were built, new facilities were created, and then after the tournament, everything was abandoned. So the actual economic cost was quite significant for the host countries. Yes, they got the pride and the kudos of hosting some of the most great gatherings of different peoples around the world together, but there was a legacy issue in terms of what's going to happen to these facilities once the tournament goes away. And remember, it's only there for 4 weeks. I think as far as Germany is concerned, what we will see, I think we have to be a little bit cautious about some people are perhaps overstating the economic benefits, because for every extra euro that's perhaps being spent in it will be full of football fans, they might choose to go elsewhere. If we take a look at spending within German citizens themselves, yes, they might spend more time watching football and watching the games in bars and so on, but that means that they're spending less time going to the theatre, going to the cinema, going out for meals, spending money on other products as well. So there are very much winners and losers whenever these mega tournaments take place.
The local media here is really focused on the intricacies of the tax relationship between UEFA and Germany, pointing out that there's a tax deal between the two sides from 2018 that actually reduces what the organization has to pay for this tournament, for a lot of the costs for this tournament. Now, some fees will be paid, but it looks like it could have been a lot more without this deal. That appears to be something that's a contract that's a requirement of hosting in the first place. Do you see that there's a bit more sort of wariness between potential hosts and UEFA, or is UEFA just such a big, and the Euro Championship, such a big deal for most countries that they're going to overlook a lot of that in the end?
I think what we are seeing from an increasing number of countries in relation not just to the Euros, but other tournaments as well, is that national governments are under an awful lot of pressure. They're under a lot of scrutiny with regards to their economic performance. And they're aware that should they be seen to be putting on what you might refer to as trophy events, kudos events, that does have an impact upon broader macroeconomic issues. If there is less money going into education and health and housing and so on, because it's all being seen to be invested into what is ultimately a short-term interesting tournament, then perhaps that can be turned against the ruling parties. So we have seen from both FIFA. FIFA calls itself a charity, and therefore it does not pay tax when the FIFA World Cup takes place. Players don't pay tax either on the earnings for the World Cup. FIFA negotiates extremely well on behalf of itself and behalf of the players, but that also does have an economic impact, and it looks like UEFA has followed that particular route, even though it has far fewer host countries to potentially look after the tournament on their behalf.
One thing that we were thinking of as we were preparing for this interview is, are there certain groups of fans that can actually have a greater economic impact on wherever their host city is? And we're thinking of the English, for example, or any sort of group that tends to spend a bit more, that tends to bring larger crowds with them when they travel. Have we seen anything like that?
Well, I think Germany is experiencing an invasion from Scotland at present. The Scottish fans do have a reputation, A, for being incredibly well behaved, B, probably seeing it as a challenge which they are determined to overcome, to drink every town dry in which they decide to visit. So yes, that there are specific industries which will benefit significantly. Certainly hospitality, certainly bars and restaurants and so on. So and anything connected, I think, in terms of the broader tourism issue. But would you, if you were an American citizen, would you necessarily also want to go to those cities when you know that they're going to be full of football fans? What we will see is benefits from those countries coming, and it does look that many fans are travelling without tickets simply for the sheer joy of being able to be ambassadors for their country and to wear their national colours with pride, and also to mingle. The World Cup in 2006 in Germany, for anybody who went there, and I was fortunate enough to be there, was a fantastic success. And I think people have remembered that and they've passed that on, and that's why we probably see an uptick in terms of the numbers attending the tournament this year.
Yeah, and I would imagine that translates also to higher security costs for a lot of these cities when you do have larger fan groups moving through. I want to ask, you mentioned the Germany 2006 World Cup. Here they referred to that as a kind of summertime fairy tale. And they saw, in particular, after Germany did much better than expected, they saw a kind of boost that many pointed to later and said that, consumer confidence, things like that. You could see that it brought this kind of uptick. Are there intangibles for teams that win unexpectedly, maybe even expectedly, in terms of the economic mood at home, in terms of what it does for the overall position of the population, the readiness to spend? I don't know.
Yes, I think there is a potential feel-good factor. I think some observers here in the UK have suggested that the decision to hold a surprise election towards the end of the tournament is the government in charge at present banking on England and perhaps Scotland as well performing well in the tournament, and therefore people having a more positive feel about their broader environment, their broader socio-economic position on the back of that, and therefore they might be more inclined to support the incumbent government than consider an alternative. So we do see, in terms of what you might call, for a better reference, a happiness index, it's hugely impacted upon a tournament of this nature if an individual country's team performs better than expected and brings a lot of pride to the nation.
Kieran, before we let you go, we have to ask, what's your pick for this tournament?
Well, I actually think Germany will sneak it. I do have a vested interest. I'm a fan of Brighton and Hove Albion, so therefore I'm a huge fan of Pascal Gross. He's our player of the season for Brighton. He's been a magnificent ambassador for himself and his country. And we've also got Dennis Undav, who's a Brighton player. So I think, given their talents and how well they've performed for their respective clubs this season, that's where my money's going. It's got the good wishes of the country behind it, and I think that does uplift the players. You always tend to see the home country doing slightly better than perhaps the bookmakers would consider on the back of that.
All right, that's Kieran Maguire, University of Liverpool, and co-host of the Price of Football podcast. Kieran, thanks so much.
Thank you.